أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to The Awaited, our show that is dedicated to the 12th Holy Imam. This week I'm with Sayed Zafar Abbas, Assalamu alaikum, where we hope to take a brief look at one of the du'as that were revealed to him, commonly described by its first line, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma rizukna tawfiq at-ta'a. Before we get into some of the pertinent points that the dua raises, I just wanted to look at the authenticity of the dua. Where does this dua come from? Who narrates it? When did it come about? Was it to one of the naibs or was it to someone else? Basically, the authenticity of it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The dua is mentioned in Mafatih al-Jinan, amongst other books, and Sahib Mafatih al-Jinan, Shaykh Abbas Qummi rahmatullah alayh, says that he has taken it from Misbah al-Mutahajjid, which is an earlier dua book. Because of the meticulous nature of Shaykh Abbas Qummi, he is well known as a muhaddith, as someone who's an expert in the hadith literature. The things that is included in the book are generally all considered very authentic. He hasn't mentioned a chain of narration in the book. In fact, he says that I didn't mention chains of narration because I didn't want to make the book too long. But given his reputation as a muhaddith, as someone who's very meticulous in hadith literature, scholars have said that generally everything in Mafatih al-Jinan all comes from very reliable chains of narration, because Shaykh Abbas was very meticulous in doing so. That's really the background to the dua. I believe it comes through one of the naibs, because it is said to be a dua that is narrated from the Imam himself, as in it is the dua of the Imam but also from the Imam. So I believe it comes through one of the naibs, though I'm not 100% on that.
So I suppose, like scholars today, when it's said that this comes from Mafatih, it's taken because those that have done or previously looked at some of the narrations or some of the du'as or some of the amals that are in Mafatih al-Jinan have seen that everything is concrete. It's been tried and tested by teachers in the past. So now it's sort of got that seed of approval or that accreditation that if it's in Mafatih, let's do it, or we can trust it.
Yes, and of course, as we'll look at the contents of the dua, the contents of the dua will tell us really that how crucial these things are, which are corroborated by other very famous and well-known and authentic narrations. So there's nothing in the content of the dua even that would raise any questions with regards to whether it's reliable or not. And of course, there's multiple ways in the science of hadith to test narrations, and of course the chain of narration is one of them, but also the content of the narration. And it is very common for people to, or for scholars of hadith to accept narrations regardless of the chain of narration, if the content corroborates directly with other authentic chains or authentic ahadith, with the Holy Quran, with the principles of the religion generally. So things that which we generally consider principles, if a narration is in line with that, if a narration is corroborates with that, then it is generally accepted on the basis that the content is correct.
Ahsan. Well, without any further ado, I've just taken out 5 lines specifically that I feel that we can really discuss and see what the Imam is trying. First of all, what the Imam is praying for, and what the Imam is teaching us to pray for. So there are various ways that we can take it. The first line, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma rizukna tawfiq at-ta'a. It says, "Oh Allah, sustain us with your goodwill for obedience as a duty." This is one of the translations. I want to look at the idea of obedience, so being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His commands as a means of rizq, so sustenance. So we often we often take sustenance to mean, for example, livelihood or health or these kind of things, normal blessings that have come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the idea of being obedient to Him is not something in and of our own doing. Rather, it's something that is a rizq. So could you?
If we look at the way rizq has been used in narrations, we'll see that one of the meanings is something like sustenance when we talk about food, or we talk about money or health, as you said. But one of the meanings is much more general than that. So rizq in those kinds of narrations, and in fact in this particular dua as well, is literally to ask for something. So because I want something, I'm asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give it to me. So that rizq is something that is given to me. And that is really the general meaning of the word rizq as it's being used here. So it's just it's a more formal way of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me something, rather than saying give me. You're saying, Allahumma arzuqna. So you grant this to me. Give this to me in the best way, in the way that you sustain me with food and water and health and shelter and all these other things. Give me this as well. And like I say, it's very interesting that that he says tawfiq at-ta'a, that I want to be given the goodwill, the opportunity for obedience. So it's not obedience isn't something that is just reliant on my physical being, the fact that I can pray, the fact that I'm healthy enough to fast, the fact that I'm wealthy enough to go for Hajj, the fact that I have the things that I can give zakat. But there is an element of tawfiq which is involved in that. That there will be people who are healthy and wealthy and have time, but they don't have tawfiq. So the Imam is saying, continue to pray for tawfiq, because you will have all the things, and some people will not have the tawfiq. And that there's nobody more unfortunate than someone who has everything but doesn't have tawfiq. He doesn't have the opportunity, doesn't have the goodwill, if you like, if as that translation says, of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That there's nothing really physically stopping him from doing anything. But I think this also highlights to us that obedience or worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't a physical act, or it's not just a physical act, but it's to do with the brain, it's to do with the mind, it's to do with the intention and the heart. And that the physical is a way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but is the means and not the end. And in order for a person to go from the means to the end, they need the tawfiq that will allow them to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that He deserves to be obeyed.
Could we take tawfiq to loosely be translated as, say, for example, inspiration? So to be inspired to do a good action. So say, for example, I have health, I have free time, but maybe I need some inspiration to go out and volunteer, to get involved, for example, things like that. Is that how you'd...
Certainly, I mean, there's certainly a case for saying that we might loosely say it's inspiration, in the sense that even despite all the opportunity available, I don't take up the opportunity to do it. So I need that inspiration to go and do it. So we could maybe translate in that way. Just to show, I think the key in this sentence is to show that it is not only to do with the body and the physical, it's to do with the mind. And in addition to that, it's to do with whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me tawfiq. So I've got to keep praying for that tawfiq so that He continues giving it to me.
While you were speaking, something came to mind again about this idea that belief and obedience and all these things are not down to us alone. Again, I'm not sure of the reference, you could correct me. In the Quran, Allah says that it's up to me who believes. That I think He was telling the Prophet that don't be too disheartened if people do not believe, because ultimately it's my decision. It comes down to me. I decide who is guided and who likewise is misguided.
In the sense, you're right, in the sense that some people try and take this or try and misinterpret this to mean that God didn't want me to believe. But I think what this verse is trying to tell us is that if there's a person who doesn't want to believe, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not send His guidance to that person, because that person has shown no willingness to believe. Whereas his justice now dictates that He has to focus and He has to send His mercy upon those who have chosen to believe in Him, and not to those who have not chosen to believe. And that's what it means when He says that it's my choice whether who believes and who doesn't believe, because that person has shown no willingness to come towards that belief. And so ultimately it's still that person's choice. It's just that after that, having made that choice, the consequence is that now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give him those blessings that He will give to those who believe. And so yes, it's continually important to keep praying for the continued opportunity and inspiration of worshipping Him and obeying Him in the fullest way.
So ultimately a sort of two-way street, if you like. The initial impetus from us, but then obviously the blessings from Him, so that we can get to that point. Again, this is one of the following lines that comes after the initial sentiments, was the idea. It says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sidqan niyya. So the Imam is instructing us to pray for intentions that are sincere. We often speak about sincerity of intention, and it's a topic that can take up a lot of time. But how do we maintain this idea that to have a sincere intention? Because often we can start something with a good intention, trying to get closer to God or trying to improve ourselves. But then, I don't know, someone could be watching, or anything can come across, and suddenly the intentions gets mixed.
I think I would translate this sentence slightly differently and say that what sidq niyya means is keep us true to our intentions. So, because intentions by their definition are sincere. Nobody else knows about them apart from me. We have a narration about this. The Holy Prophet of Islam says that an-niyatul mu'min ahsan or afdalu min amalihi. A believer's intention is better or greater than his action. And somebody asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam about this narration. They said, why? What's the reasoning behind the intention being greater than the action? And the Imam said that because there's a possibility that the action might be for showing off, but the niyyah is always for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The niyyah is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because nobody else knows about it. The only person who knows about the intention is me. And so the intention is greater, as the Holy Prophet of Islam says. So I think how I would see this is that keep us true to that intention, that our intention is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's only when I transform from intention to action is where riyā or showing off or the wrong idea of doing things comes in. Until it's still an intention, nobody else knows about it. So there's no question of it being for somebody else, because nobody else knows. Only I know and Allah knows. So it has to be for Him. It's when it transforms into an action and I start doing things, and then I think, okay, I'm doing this because this person will be happy with me, or this person won't be happy with me, or I will be able to get a favor from this person. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now initially you started by saying that, or you started doing this for me, but it turned out that you were doing it for somebody else. So I think the key is to continue to revert back to that intention, that when I started, it was only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when I end it, it should only be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a difficult thing to do, because there will be many times along the way where the intention will, or the action will make the intention waver. But this is why we're praying. We're saying, may Allah keep us true to that intention that we started off with, that this action is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, and if we keep reminding ourselves that whatever anybody else can do for us, Allah can do better than that. Whatever anybody can give to me, Allah can give me better than that. Then, if that is always in the back of my mind, that whatever I do, and whoever I'm doing it for, whatever they can do for me, Allah can do better than that. And if I continue to remember that, then there's no way that I will do anything except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Have you come across any tips or any sort of practical ways that we can, like really, because this is a problem that a lot of us face. Is there anything particular that we can do or try and sort of, I know you mentioned keep in mind.
I think also, like, there are certain actions that if we can, we should keep them private. We should do them in private, and B, keep them private, so we don't talk about them. And that's a good way to maintain the sincerity and maintain the purity of intention. But there are certain actions, of course, that you can't keep private. They are by nature they are public actions. In those cases, I think it's continually important to remind yourself after you have done that action, or after people have praised you for that action, to say that this was nothing to do with me. This was not my own capability or my own ability of doing this action, but rather it was tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He allowed me, He gave me this opportunity to do this action or to do this good deed, right? Because I did it in public and people saw it. And perhaps to again remind myself that the reason why I did it in public is not so that I could get praise from other people, but the reason I did it in public is so that other people may be inspired to have that tawfiq to do something good as well. And if that, again, if that is in my mind, then again I'm continually thinking back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not only do I want tawfiq for myself, but I want it for other people as well. And I think that really is a very practical way to make sure that the intention doesn't waver and it stays true to where we started from.
So, a few lines along in the dua, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَطَحِّرْ بُطُونَنَا مِنَ الْحَرَامِ وَالشُّبْهَةِ, and free our stomachs from the suspected and forbidden food and gluttony. I think, here the Imam is highlighting the importance of the food we eat. I think, especially living in the West, we have to be more concerned, or I feel, like the idea that we've done shows on halal meat, for example, in the past, and, some of the research has founded that, the majority of the meat that is passed as halal is actually haram. And here, of course, the Imam is highlighting that, we really need to be sure. And here we're praying, so we should pray to Allah that, look, help us in this endeavor, that what we put into our stomachs is halal. So that, the importance of that. And secondly, what is the effect of food on us? We often hear the saying that we are what we eat. But how far does this go?
So this is very interesting, because the dua is obviously talking about acts of worship and intention and things like that. And in the middle of that, we've got a statement about food. I think this shows that while we might think food is something separate to ibadat and to worship, as far as the religion is concerned, food is very central to ibadat. There's narrations from some of the ulama of akhlaq, or the ulama of akhlaq mention, in light of narrations, that the reason why sometimes a person feels lazy to get up to do ibadah, to perhaps this person was doing ibadah, he was regular in praying Salatul Tahajjud, and now they feel lazy in getting up, or they are up at night but they feel lazy in doing the ibadah. They say the reason why that, or one of the reasons why that is because the food that they've eaten, because of the the food that has gone into their stomach. Not just the haram, but also, as the Imam says, the shubha, that which was doubtful. So, while the shubha is not haram, from a legal point of view, if a Muslim person tells me that this food is halal, then it's halal. I can eat it. There's no problem in that. But this is why the Imam is saying we want to pray from the shubha as well, from the doubtful. If I have a doubt that maybe it might not be 100%, then it's better for me to avoid it in order to safeguard my own spiritual well-being. So not, just as much as I'm concerned about my physical well-being, I'm concerned about the food that I eat, because I don't want to become unhealthy, I don't want to develop diseases later on in life. Similarly, the Imam is saying, be concerned with your spiritual well-being. You don't want to develop diseases in your spirituality. You don't want to develop spiritual diseases. And if you want to avoid those, then not only do you want to pray from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, keep my stomachs free and pure of haram, but also that which is doubtful. So, there's no doubt that the food has a very deep-rooted effect on the way that we act, the way that we see spirituality, the way that our spirituality is enhanced or reduced. The wisdom behind certain things being haram or even being makruh to eat is that they will decrease the spirituality. And because of that, it's been mentioned that, for example, stay away from this food, don't drink this, because this will decrease your spirituality and it will make you more material. And in the same way, overeating or gluttony, as we mentioned, or even things like which are generally halal, but eating too much of them, or eating too many of those things. There's a very famous narration from Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, who says, don't make your stomach a graveyard for the animals, in the sense that eating meat is okay, it's halal, but don't go to the point of eating so much that it's a graveyard for animals. You've got so many animals in you. So there's an importance to the balance, and like I say, like we're concerned about our physical well-being, we're concerned about our physical health, about saving ourselves from diseases of the body. We should also be concerned, the Imam is telling us, to save ourselves from the disease of the soul and to be free from those spiritual ailments which will also be affected by the food that we eat.
Okay, I have two questions. The first is the idea, if we feel that we're going through, for example, a spiritual rut, and we're going through, I don't know, we can maybe suspect we went to a restaurant that we weren't familiar with in the past. So we're not sure, but maybe we suspect. What is there that we can do? Should we fast? What can we do?
There's certain things that, again, ulama of akhlaq talk about if you want to increase your spirituality. And this is a question that quite regularly comes up amongst young people. And that is, for example, if you've visited a place in the past which you suspect now or you think was doubtful, then avoid going to that place in the future, but also to reduce the red meat intake, for example. If you find yourself in a spiritual rut, in the difficulty, spirituality is a bit low, reduce the red meat intake, reduce the amount of food that you eat. And in fact, this is something that I've tried in the past, and you'll see how it's very easy for a person to survive and have a perfectly healthy diet on a lot less than we usually eat. A lot of the time we overeat without actually realizing that we've eaten too much. Narrations, for example, state 1/3 for eating, 1/3 for water, and 1/3 for breathing. And sometimes we're all the way up to here, we're struggling with the breathing. So just the little things, I'm not saying, for example, cut it out completely, but maybe reduce the intake. If you have it every day, have it every other day. Fasting is a very important one. In fact, if you go through some of the modern diets nowadays, they will tell you that even once you finish the diet, do 1 day of the week as the diet for the rest of your life. And religion of Islam, for example, in the hadith of the Holy Prophet, fast on Monday and Thursday as far as possible. And you'll see that if you even fast 1 day a week for a couple of months, you'll see the difference in both your physical well-being, but also in your spirituality.
And the second question that I had was the idea of this shubha, of this doubt. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to meat, in particular, we have to be 100%. There can't be any doubt. Of course, that becomes very difficult living in the West, and we don't necessarily have very good or very familiar relations with, for example, the restaurants that we go to or the butchers. How sure are we? Because there's a long chain before from abattoir to the plate. Are we ever 100% sure?
I think, like I said, the legal requirement is not to be 100%, or is not necessarily to be 100% sure. As long as a Muslim person is telling me that this meat is halal, then that's sufficient as a very minimum benchmark to find out whether something is halal. Of course, to save ourselves from shubha, from doubt, what I'm trying to do is to say that I'm only going to visit the restaurants where I'm positive that I trust this person 100%, I know where they source their meat from, or, and I know this is very difficult in today's day and age, or I'm going to, as much as possible, avoid eating in establishments outside, because there's a lot more risk of shubha, of doubt. And it's much more likely that if I source the meat at home, not only is it about the halalness, if you like, of the meat, but also how the meat has been cooked, or how the food has been prepared. Because of course, again, this is not a responsibility for me to find out, but what is included in the shubha is that I don't know how the food has been prepared in the restaurant or in the fast food shop, or whatever. I'm relying that the hygiene standards are good. I'm relying on the fact that XYZ process has been followed, but I don't know. And maybe the meat was fine, but it was something in the preparation process that made it shubha. Maybe there was something that, while it was being prepared, made it shubha. Maybe the person hadn't washed their hands, and that made it shubha. Or maybe the person had touched something haram before that, and that made, the meat was fine, the person was fine. It's just something they had done previously that had made it shubha. People would go to the extent, again, the ulama of akhlaq would go to the extent of saying that you don't know whether this person had done ghusl, for example, while they were making your food. And if they hadn't, then that had also negatively affected your the way that your food. Again, it's not haram. Let's make this clear. It's not haram. It's not your responsibility to find out what that person had done or what he hadn't done. But there's precautionary methods. There is ways of saving yourself from negative effects that might have on your spirituality. Maybe on someone like me, it would not have an effect, but on someone who is of a higher spiritual status, they would certainly feel the effect straight away, because they're very meticulous in what they eat. They're very meticulous in how they do, and their level of ibadah is very high, that as soon as they would go to somewhere where there would be a little bit of shubha, it would negatively affect their spirituality.
Ahsant. I mean, of course, we could talk about this for quite a while, because it's such an important topic, and I think something that we need to raise a little bit more. However, moving on, there's quite a few points that the Imam makes that are, again, quite interesting. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَتَفَضَّلْ عَلَى عُلَمَائِنَا بِالزُّهْدِ وَالنَّسِيحَةِ. Says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allah bless our elite with beneficence and piety. Now, initially, I was wondering, who is he referring to here when he means elite? And it seems that it's the ulama of the day. Why is he specifically talking about our ulama? Why is he blessing them or praying for their beneficence and their prosperity. Is he trying to highlight how important they are for us as a whole?
I mean, the two words that he uses for them will tell us why he's praying for them and what is the reasoning behind that. In the sense that in the absence of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, in the ghaibat of the Imam, the ulama are at least, at the very least, the spiritual guides and spiritual leaders of the community. So, and that's highlighted in the two things that he prays for. He says, pray for them or give them the zuhud, the piety, and nasiha. So, and the order is very important because he says he's praying for them for zuhud. So, an alim, a person of knowledge, his knowledge is of no use unless he is acting upon that knowledge. He's becoming a person of piety. So it's not just about knowing, it's about those who know and act, who are the ones that, so the knowledge is bringing with it a responsibility. Yes, they're the leaders of the community, but that leadership means they have responsibility to set the highest standards. And then one nasiha, so that now they can give good advice. So that you're only in a position to give advice or give nasiha when you're yourself acting upon the knowledge. So the Imam is saying, he's telling us this is the two-part role of the ulama. That they have to know, they have to act upon what they know, and then once they're acting upon what they know, then they can advise people. Because this is exactly how the Holy Prophet of Islam did. This is how the Aimma alayhimus salam did. That they knew, they acted on what they knew, and then they ordered people to follow them in what they did. The Holy Prophet of Islam could have easily said, I want you to pray. He didn't say that. He says, pray like you see me praying. He says, do this. Whatever he orders people to do, he does it first himself, and then he orders Muslims to follow him. So similarly, the Imam is saying, this is how highly we rank the ulama, that they are in the absence of a ma'soom, in the absence of an infallible, they are the people they are the ones who people will go to for guidance. Therefore, they have to act in that same way. They have to act upon what they know, and then advise people. So, not only is it important for them to act on what they know, but it's not sufficient for them to just become a zahid and to just act upon what they know and become pious for themselves. No, then they have to advise people. They have to give nasiha to other people so that other people can go into that road of piety as well.
And I think he continues and he corroborates this when he prays for future students to be able to rise up and reach those ranks where they can be able to have this piety and be able to give the good advice. But then interestingly, he prays for the ummah to be able to listen and to take the advice of these people. So, I'm joining the dots here and I'm saying, is this some sort of link to the system of taqleed and marja'iyya in that sense where, because we obviously have hadith from the 11th Imam, from the 12th Imam that says that in our occultation, in our absence, you follow these people that have certain traits. So as an ummah, like he's praying for the ability, or for our ability to be able to pay attention to these people. Again, is this an argument for this system of taqleed?
I think without a shadow of doubt, it's an indication towards following those who know. And really and truly, in addition or in apart from the ahadith which talk about taqleed and talk about following a mujtahid in the absence of the imam, I think really it's a very logical thing to do. The basis of why we follow the prophets and the imams is on the basis of knowledge. The criteria that they have selected over other people is that they know more than everybody else. So in their absence, when we don't have access to them, we go for the next best thing. And the next best thing is the people who know the religion. And obviously those who know the religion are the ulama. So in matters of the religion, when we've set our bar so high, that the Prophet and the Imams have to be the most knowledgeable people in their respective times. When we don't have access to them, we go for the next step down on the ladder, which is the people who know the most about religion, and they're the ulama. So when we've established that as a principle, then we don't need a narration to say you have to follow the mujtahideen. You know, the brain tells us that, okay, we don't have the imam available to us right now, so who do I consult about religion? I go to the next best thing, which is available to me, and they are the ulama.
Ahsan. The final point that I wanted to touch on, like the dua is fairly short. There's quite a few lines. There's about 20 different lines. But the final point that I wanted to look at, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وعلى الشباب بالإنابة والتوبة. The idea that he says that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he's praying for the youth, that they are able to ask for repentance and apology within their youth. I think we often fall into this sort of procrastinative kind of mentality that, you know, okay, I've sinned or I've made a mistake. I didn't mean it. I made a mistake, but I'll ask for forgiveness later. I'll ask, you know, during Ramadan or whatever it is. We keep putting it off. What is the, you know, finally, what is the importance of the youth, and how valuable is it, the idea that we have this youth, this health, to make use of, you know, asking for forgiveness, particularly as he's highlighted?
I think, you know, there's numerous narrations which talk about the youth. You know, the Holy Prophet tells Abu Dhar in the famous narration, make use of your youth before you become old. Amir al-Mu'minin says in a famous narration that certain things are good, but when they come from certain people, they become even better. He gives a whole list of things. Amongst them, he says that repentance is good, but if it comes from young people, it's even better. And similarly, in this narration, the Imam says, you know, grant our young people, our shabab, the opportunity, the tawfiq to apologize, to feel, you know, apologetic over what they've done, and to repent and return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because tawbah really is to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think what this highlights is that there is a acknowledgement from the Imam that when you're young, you are more prone to committing sins, because there's a high level of you know, emotion that is within the person, and that will lead people to commit sins. And it is, of course, the weakness of the human prototype that the human will commit sins. Apart from the infallibles, nobody is free of sins. But what is important is not to think that because I've committed a sin, that's the end. That, you know, lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to you know, what we call the shaitan's double trick, that he at one point will say, okay, just commit a sin, it's no big deal. And then once you've become habitual in committing sins, he will then tell you, now you're so far down the line that there's no way you can go back. Whereas both of them were wrong. Is that A, you committed a sin, it was a big deal, but B, if you did go that far down the line, His mercy is still always greater than that. Regardless of how great your sin was, His mercy is greater than that. So what it's reminding us is that don't become confident over your sin because of His mercy, but also don't lose hope in His mercy either. And if you continue to be apologetic, you continue to remind yourself that you need to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you'll be able to remove yourself from the possibility of getting stuck into that rut. Whereas sin is something that will happen. He's saying don't use that as an opportunity to go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but use it as an opportunity to try and come back to Him. So that door is always open for you, and you have to keep praying that you continually get the tawfiq to return back to Him.
Ahsant. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. I wish we could discuss some of the other verses within this dua. Inshallah, next time. Join us again where we'll continue this discussion on the 12th Imam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.